Happy Friday, everyone. Welcome back to another MorphMarket show and tell. I'm your boy MJ, and with me today is the one and only Steven Kush, aka the Scrub King on Instagram. No, actually, you're not Scrub King on Instagram. Steven, how you doing, buddy?
Pretty good, dude. How are you doing?
It's an honor to have you here, mainly because you're passionate behind such a really cool, rare reptile we have in the hobby. But for the people who don't know who you are, why don't you give a quick introductory as far as what your involvement in the reptile hobby?
Yeah, so I've been involved in the reptile industry for majority of my life at this point. I've been keeping reptiles, breeding reptiles for about 15 years. And, I've been very fortunate to be able to do this for my, for a living now, kind of have this be my lifestyle. I've had a lot of cool opportunities to work in the zoo field and the rodent industry, and now to be full-time snake breeder. So very fortunate to be here. And then I'm also fortunate to have found some species that I'm very passionate about to work with, primarily that being scrub pythons.
And for anyone out there who's curious, what is it about a scrub python for you that makes you so passionate? And I mean, it is the foundation to your entire collection, I would say also.
Yeah.
What would you say to that?
So a lot of things. I'm a python guy through and through. Really a snake guy, but if I had to pick one kind of group of snakes that are the ones that I'm the most passionate about, it's definitely pythons. And as a teenager, I was learning about a lot of the different python species. Kind of working with different ones, with whether that be green trees, olive pythons, Indian pythons, Burmese, retics, white-lip pythons, Papuans, etc. I was seeing all the different aspects of pythons that really got my attention and really were the ones that made me click. And when I found scrub pythons, it kind of took all of my favorite aspects of pythons and brought them all into one snake. That kind of slender arboreal build, kind of like a green tree or a rough scale python or something like that. But in, a larger python kind of package, kind of like a Burm or a retic, but manageable for one person within reason. And then the natural variety that comes in with scrub pythons, with the 5 different species and all the different localities, kind of that aspect like you would see with carpet pythons or with green tree pythons, that I really was a fan of all the different locality types and the natural variation, and then the few morphs that exist. That coupled with just their intelligence. I mean, MJ, you know this as well as I do, because you've worked with lots of scrubs as well, that these animals just function at a different level than a lot of other python species do. They're very intelligent. They're very intelligent. They're very confident animals. Like for instance, like a Timor python or a white-lip python might be quick to get nervous, run away, stuff like that. Where scrub pythons are they'll stand their ground. They're not really afraid of you. They know they have a long strike range. They know that they're accurate. They're confident with their abilities, but because of that, they don't always need to use it as well. So you can really have a good back and forth kind of relationship with the snakes. If you respect them, you can form a bond, and and it's a really rewarding one.
All right, well, let's give the people what they're here for, and they want to see some scrubs. But before we do that, guys, do me a favor, hit that like button. Let's get the likes up for all the scrubs out there. Absolutely. Okay. And definitely hit that subscribe button. This is your first time hanging out with us. Hit that subscribe button. If you hit that notification bell, you'll be reminded of every single show and tell Friday that we do on the MorphMarket episode. But Steven, without further ado, please drop this scrub heat for all these people out there. Okay.
Well, here we go. We have the first one right here. So I have 3 scrubs to show you guys today. All 3 of them are listed up on my MorphMarket page right now for all of you watching. It is Kush Reptile on MorphMarket. So this right here is a Barneck scrub python. This locality type falls under the species Somalia amethystina, which is the one that encompasses most of the scrub pythons that we have in captivity. So they're known for, as the namesake would suggest, the barred neck patterning you can see on this guy right here, and then those defined bars throughout the body. There are individuals that have heavy bars, reduced pattern bars. This guy is in shed right now, so his coloration isn't fully coming through. But with that said, he's a very, very dark individual. So this is actually fairly representative of his normal coloration. which is pretty interesting. A look that I really love. The dark Barnecks are one that are definitely highly sought after by a lot of people who are fans of Barneck scrub pythons. And this is probably one of the darkest individuals I have produced to date. And
what's the age, Steven? Just out of curiosity, if anyone else out there, how old that?
This animal is 2 years old right now. So what's nice about scrub pythons compared to some of the other larger python species is that they don't have a really rapid growth rate, kind of like a Burmese python or a reticulated python. So if this is a step up for you as a keeper, if you're somebody who is into carpet pythons or green tree pythons or any smaller pythons, you can get the challenge of a larger snake with a scrub python, but in a with a snake that isn't going to grow quite so quickly. So by the time it's 2 years old, you don't have a 9-foot snake on your hand that you need an 8-foot cage for. You have something that is still very reasonably sized, very manageable, and an animal that you kind of learn their behaviors when they're young, so that when they're larger, you're putting yourself in a better situation to, not be in any sort of danger with the animal. Any larger python, there is kind of an inherent risk, whether anyone wants to admit it or not, just based on their strength and their, the fact that they are constrictors. So if you learn the behaviors of the animal while they're young, a bite from a scrub python of this size, you're hardly going to notice it. So you can understand, what their triggers are, what gets them to the point of of being, defensive, and try to, learn how to avoid those as they get older, so you can, really cultivate a good relationship with that animal. You have one of these next guys I'm showing you going real rogue over here on the side.
I do want to point out the fact that this snake's in shed and still this calm. I think that's pretty awesome.
Yeah. So scrub pythons have had historically a pretty poor reputation as far as their temperaments go. And a lot of that came from the fact that all of the scrub pythons that were around were just wild caught imports. And as the case is with a lot of reptiles, wild caught imports have a much worse demeanor than captive bred individuals, especially multi-generation captive bred individuals. That, coupled with what I was describing about how these snakes just are physically capable. They have long strike ranges, and they're very visually oriented, especially when you compare them to some of the other python species. Their visual orientation is almost more similar to a colubrid than a python in a lot of ways. So all of those factors combined created a scenario to where these snakes were able to develop kind of a bad reputation, especially people didn't really know how to handle them correctly. They didn't know how to, kind of curb their defensiveness when necessary. But in my experience with this species, that has been almost completely unfounded. I mean, at this point, I've been working with scrub pythons for about 8 years now. I've easily had, come across my collection, whether it be wild caught animals I produce, captive bred animals from other collections, probably north of 300 scrub pythons. And I could probably count on 1 or 2 hands the animals that I would consider truly kind of a pain in the ass to work with. And of those, almost exclusively, they were the wild caught individuals, especially for the Barnecks, the ones that I've produced. This is standard issue temperament for these snakes. They have very strong feeding responses, which is always a good thing when you're dealing with snakes in general, especially with, a python species that isn't multi-generational captive bred and, semi-domesticated at the point of like a ball python or a carpet python. That always helps as far as just kind of routine husbandry, making sure that the animal grows at a healthy rate if you have good feeders. But then from a keeper standpoint, from enjoying what you're doing, having a nice, calm animal is always a very nice, added bonus, along with just a beautiful snake to begin with. So that was always something that I was very, adamant about trying to have as part of my breeding program with the scrub pythons, was trying to produce animals that have really good demeanors that not only I'd want to have in my collection, would want to work with, that I know other people would want as well. Especially for a species like this that has such a bad reputation, historically speaking. And, over the last 5-6 years or so, that reputation has started to go away, and rightfully so, where more people are experiencing scrub pythons and, experiencing the truth of how these animals really are as, as snakes to keep, and how, if you don't understand their intelligence, if you don't understand some of their behaviors, then it's understandable why you might think some animals are defensive. But if you, this right here, I mean, it's hard to see a snake that's gonna, be so calmly crawling around, trying to climb on your face and stuff, and think that animal is potentially an aggressive snake.
What's next on the docket, my man?
We have a couple other scrubbies to show you guys here. I'm gonna try to get this guy back effectively first.
And just to confirm, that snake is on your MorphMarket, right?
Yes, all three of these are my MorphMarket. This one definitely is up there. All righty. Come here, little bub. So this girl right here is another Barneck scrub python, and this is a 2024 baby that I produced. She is up on MorphMarket currently as well. And one thing that you can kind of see shown well from the last snake to this one, another really cool aspect about scrub pythons that I very much love about them is their ontogenic color change. So very similar to green tree pythons, these guys are born with kind of like a brick red coloration and usually minimal pattern compared to what they do end up having as adults. Over the first 2 years or so of their life, they go through a color change to where they kind of go from that red coloration to a bit more brown, and then ultimately to whatever their end color is going to be. Barneck scrub pythons, they really have a two-tone look to them. They have the black bars, and then they have their base color. The base color can range from, a tan coloration, olive green, dark brown sometimes, gold on some exceptional individuals, like a yellow gold coloration, even kind of like an orangish gold coloration. So the base color is the one that is the more variable. The bands are typically black, like you see on this animal. Some reduced pattern individuals can have a more muted banding coloration, which is a look that I really, really like. And this girl is actually from a reduced pattern pairing. Another thing that's really cool about Barneck scrub pythons is that no matter what the parents look like, when you breed them, you are going to get an array of looks in the offspring. They might generally all be slated towards one end of the spectrum. If you have a higher pattern pairing, I would say probably 80-90% of the babies are going to be higher patterned. But then from my experience, at least one or two are going to slip in there that don't even look like they're from that clutch. And vice versa. Like this girl right here, both of her parents had very little pattern at all, very little barring on her back, if I can get her to turn around. But then one like this pops out, which doesn't have necessarily the heaviest banding, but definitely defined and much more prominent than either parent. So one like this could go in a project really in either direction. Considering her genetics, this animal as an adult could be bred to a reduced pattern male and produce some really spectacular reduced pattern offspring, or the other way to where you could put a really heavily patterned male to this female and then produce a clutch of majority heavy banded individuals with probably one or two reduced patterns kind of slipping in there in the mix. With all that said, we are really still in the infancy of scrub breeding. So there's a lot of this is kind of, trial by fire every year, kind of getting closer and closer to figuring it out.
For anyone out there who's thinking, what is a snake that size eating? And then when does it get bumped up from your experience?
Yeah. So a baby scrub python of about this size and age, this animal is about 6 months old. As you can actually see, she's got a little lump in her still right now. These are eating like big hopper mice to small mice. So mice that are, for anyone who the gram weight's probably around like 11 or 12 grams. And then they can, it really depends on how quickly you feed them. At this age, I definitely like to feed them weekly. Scrub pythons definitely do well on I don't want to say a heavy feeding schedule when they're young, but a consistent feeding schedule. Sometimes, in my experience at least, if you grow these animals up too slowly, they can run into complications with stunting that shorten their lives significantly. So older scrub pythons, it definitely is important to limit feeding on them. Adults in particular can be prone to obesity. They're a very slender, muscular snake, but on the flip side, when they're young, they definitely need their food. So, I would say in the next couple of months, this thing will be bumped up to, a decent size, small mouse. And then normally by the time they're about a year old, I shoot for them to be around the size of eating medium mice. 2 years old, kind of like a jumbo mouse size, wean rat size or so. So, moderate growth. They're definitely not going to be eating large rats by the time they're 2 years old. But healthy growth when scrub pythons are young is extremely important to the long-term health of the animal.
Cool. What do you got next?
All right. Crazy you should ask.
If you're just hanging out, guys, if you're just watching, please hit that like button. Let's get the likes up for all the amazing scrub pythons Steven's going to be showing off for us. And here we go.
Alrighty. Let's see if this guy will chill out. All right. So this is another scrub python, but a different locality. This right here is a Womina scrub python. So just to do a little bit of boring geography, the Amethystina complex, Somalia Amethystina, they're from Papua New Guinea and some of the surrounding islands. These two that we're looking at here are the two northern types. So the Barneck scrub pythons are from essentially northwest mainland Papua New Guinea and some of the surrounding islands. And then this type right here is basically the northeastern scrub python. They have historically been called the Womina scrub python, which is not an entirely inaccurate label. Animals that look like this do come from Womina. The ones that we have in the hobby are more than likely originating from Jayapura, as that is one of the major export ports out of Papua New Guinea. And then, also a lot of collectors live there. The exporters are there, and these snakes are plentiful in that area. So, Womina, Jayapura, northeastern type scrub python, whatever you want to call them, that is what these are. They have some similarities to the Barnecks. As you can see, there's a more slight neck bar on these individuals. And then their pattern down the body is obviously not quite that banding of the Barnecks, but there's still some pretty interesting patterning down the body, kind of a granity look, especially up towards the neck of the animal. And generally they're darker than Barneck scrub pythons, but it's actually one of the cooler aspects of them is that they will oftentimes have a really strong iridescence to them, kind of similar to Boelen's pythons, which are the closest relative of the scrub python. So these are kind of like the poor man's Boelen's pythons, essentially the Womina scrub pythons, where physiologically you're getting a very, very similar animal in terms of behavior, size. Scrub pythons are a bit more slender than Boelen's pythons, but other than that, really very similar animals. And then probably appearance-wise, about as dark as you'll get in a scrub python. There are lighter colored Wominas as well, and which is really cool because variety in this species is one of the things that I covet the most about them. So any locality like this, to where there's a lot of variety in the color and pattern, really gets me excited about them. One that there has been no line breeding at all ever done with this species. So, I know for a fact with a few generations, you could have, almost solid black Womina scrub pythons, super high orange, very like light pale coloration, really high contrast, kind of whatever you'd want to do. This is one of the females that I have, or actually the one female I have listed on MorphMarket, one of them that I produced last year. To me, she's one of the standouts of the clutch. I love that like light etching on her pattern down her body. It was very hard not to choose this one as a holdback to keep for the long run for me. But I fortunately have another female from the clutch that is also really spectacular that I'll be holding on to. So this is really an opportunity for somebody to get their hands on like a holdback quality captive-bred scrub python that, especially in today's day and age of us still kind of being in the infancy of the scrub python market, it's pretty hard to come across an animal that would be a holdback in most breeders' collections.
So what got me into this reptile world, right? What species, Steven, you remember?
I should know this. Was it not green trees?
No, yeah, it wasn't green trees. No, it was typical gateway drug.
Just the ball python. Yeah.
It's not just. Come on, we love ball pythons, but we
do love ball pythons. Yeah,
I have a very ball python breeder question for you right now. Okay, because I'm wondering, you showed a different species, I want to say, compared to the Barnecks. Are we looking at different species of pythons, or are these just all different localities that you could breed together? Because I'm wondering if you could put that to a Barneck. Is that possible? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
Intertwining.
I mean, it is possible. As of right now, these are still the same species. Locality cross, or if you want to call them hybrid scrub pythons, have been bred. And
But
some people are definitely
is that frowned upon though? Like you being in the hobby, like is where you're at? Is that something you
uh,
don't encourage? I mean,
I don't want to say. I mean, it probably depends on who you ask. If you ask me, I don't think it necessarily is frowned upon. It would be frowned upon to do it and then try to misrepresent those animals. So if you were to breed a Womina scrub python like this to a Barneck scrub python like I was showing previously, ended up with offspring that looked almost identical to the Barnecks, let's say, and then you try to pass those off as pure Barneck scrub pythons, that's where people are going to really have a problem with you, myself included. Um, Personally, I don't have any hybrid or cross projects in my collection, and that's primarily due to the fact that space is just limited and I have a lot of these snakes to begin with. So all the projects I want to do of line breeding the specific locality types or species are just going to take up enough space to where I don't have any interest in doing the crosses. Some of the crosses are very beautiful, and I'm not going to take that away from them. So would I do that necessarily? No, I don't think I would. Um, and then you would also, you'd want to do a cross with individuals that have complementary phenotypes to them. The idea of just this randomly putting two different locality or species scrub pythons together for the sake of just making something new, um, to me is a pretty poor cause, and one that I don't think really would even catch on all that well. So, for locality crosses, I think if you want to do it, be very specific with your goal, and then be over the top with labeling and letting people know exactly what these snakes are. And if you sell one and the person you sold it to is later trying to sell it as pure this or pure that, then that is your responsibility to let as many people know as possible that that person is lying about what that snake is.
sounds pretty sounds hard. I think it's better to breed Barnecks to Barnecks. I feel like, I don't know, call me crazy.
I mean, to me, you can't, especially with the Barnecks, you can't beat a good Barneck. So I
Yeah.
have no ambition of doing anything other than just trying to refine Barnecks for generations to come.
Awesome. Well, while you're holding that beautiful snake, for anyone out there who are, just wanting to maybe have a scrub python as a first pet reptile, what would you
Mm.
say to that? Like, can we paint a scenario where somebody's interested in one of your scrub pythons, but it's legit their first reptile ever?
Yeah, I think a lot of people would right away say that a scrub python is not a good first pet reptile. And I would say in like 95+% of cases, that's absolutely true. I know people who had scrub pythons as their first snake and still have scrub pythons and are keeping and breeding them today. So it 100% can be done. I think at the bare minimum, you'd want to try to at least have some amount of interaction with somebody else's scrub pythons first, especially, some bigger animals, just to kind of have the idea of what you're getting yourself into. But if you are somebody who wants to buy scrub pythons as your first pet snake, you must start with a baby, a captive bred baby. There's no other way to do that successfully. I mean, I'm not going to say no other way, because there inevitably could be scenarios where somebody could get a larger animal and be successful right off the bat. But the best recipe for success in that scenario is to start off with a captive bred baby. And this is actually a great topic to bring up right now about just the husbandry. Very, very simple husbandry, similar to basically every other python. They're very hardy snakes. I always like to tell people, if you have a room of green tree pythons, carpet pythons, retics, ball pythons, whatever it may be, these snakes fit in perfectly. Same temperature, humidity parameters. You can keep them on ambient. You can keep them at room temperature with a hot spot as well. Their humidity needs are pretty general, like all the rest of pythons. You know, if you're getting good sheds, if your animals look hydrated, then they probably are. You know, I'm in the desert, so I have to spray my animals, you know, usually 2 or 3 times a week. I'll run humidifiers in the rooms. But with all that said, then they do just fine if you kind of keep up on those parameters. You know, if you keep ambient rooms at like 80 degrees, they'll do wonderful. If you're not ambient, if you have like an 86-degree hotspot and a you know, in a room temperature area, you'll do great as well. So very simple husbandry on these snakes for sure. But back to the topic of a first time keeper, it would just be a matter of doing a lot of research on these animals. You know, watching YouTube videos, reading, you know, whatever articles and papers might exist out there about them. The best resource, honestly, would be listening to podcasts. There've been probably more podcasts about scrub pythons done than really any other kind of publication, so to speak, on scrub pythons.
Where's the best place to listen about scrub pythons on a podcast? You happen to know one?
I actually do. Thank you for asking. It would be Kush's Corner on the Trap Talk Reptile Network, live every Wednesday at 9 p.m. Eastern time. That would be the place to be. I mean, we've done a few trap talks over the years, really talking heavy on scrub pythons.
Definitely.
So, you know, there are definitely plenty of good scrub python podcasts to listen to. You know, another point of shameless plugging, but I have a YouTube channel as well where I release vlog style videos. You can on YouTube, you can find it either under Steven Kush or at Kush Reptile on YouTube. And, you know, I've just started it recently, but I've been very heavy on the scrub python content, including one video I did at this point 3 weeks ago, which was an overview of the scrub python complex. So I showed an individual of all the different species and localities of scrub pythons that exist in captivity outside of Australia, with a bit of a description of where they're from, and then some of their kind of physical characteristics to kind of give an idea. Because when I was first getting into scrub pythons, you know, it was really difficult to put all the pieces together of, you know, what, thank you for the subscribe.
That came from MorphMarket too, not only from me. So
thank you, MorphMarket. So it was hard to get a grip on all of the different species and locality types, because there are a lot. You know, there are 4 different species that we have access to, and then within those species, especially within this Somalia amethystina, where these guys come from, there's almost 10 locality types. So, you know, it's hard to put all of those pieces together. And that video that I did, I think is, you know, not to sound arrogant, but I think it's the best resource on the internet for understanding that. I made the video that I wish I could have watched when I was first getting into these snakes. So, you know, my goal with it was to try to provide a resource for anybody who, you know, was in that same position that I was 8 years ago, 9 years ago, not knowing anything about these animals, but really wanting to, and, you know, wanting to find a good starting point.
So wrap up question for you, Steven. Why should someone maybe avoid buying an import scrub on a table, or do you encourage someone to buy an import? What do you have to say about an imported?
Yeah. Generally speaking, imported scrub pythons are on the hardier side as far as imported pythons go. I would say that the exceptions of that would be Halmaheras and Biak scrub pythons, which have a pretty bad reputation of being difficult to establish, which is 100% the truth. You know, but then the main thing that I would say as far as why one should go for a captive bred over a wild caught would be what you see right here. This, you know, chill animal just hanging out, calm disposition. I have wild caught scrub pythons that are calm as well. It definitely took some work, and part of that was just the fact that I've had so many of these animals that I understand their behavior. But if I was able to start off with captive bred and scrub pythons, I know I would have had a much easier time.
Yeah,
you know,
sure.
one of my favorite parts about being a breeder and selling snakes is when somebody comes back to me a few months later like, hey, this scrub python I got from you is doing great. This is my favorite snake in my collection now. He or she is just so engaging, so calm, so fun to handle, so fun to keep. That means everything to me, because that's how I feel about these snakes. So if I can provide that same experience for somebody else, then that makes this all worth it. And it brings a real deep level of gratitude to this, this hobby, this business. And, it kind of gives me validation that I've done something good with my time and, what I decided to do with my life.
And if anyone ever wanted to see your scrubs in person, maybe at a show, is there a certain reptile show that you could promise people you'll be at or anything, just in case if they ever want to plan to come by your animals?
So I'm not huge on doing shows. I primarily I'm doing stuff, through social media, but the Reptile Super Show in Pomona, California, that is the show that if you want to, Tim was at the last one, saw the scrub collection on the table. To me, being able to bring a little bit of a spread of captive-bred scrub pythons, and they're around here and there. You might see 1 or 2 on a table, but to see 10 or 15 captive-bred scrub pythons in one place is something that really has never been possible before. So I'm very grateful that I can make that happen. But yeah, if you want to see these in person, the best shot will be definitely the Reptile Super Shows.
Awesome. All right. Well, listen, Steven, this was quite the time. I am looking forward to Sunday, because Sunday, if you really want to get a good idea of what kind of scrub heat the Scrub King is packing, well, guess what? We have an actual collection tour happening right here on the MorphMarket channel. Steven Kush's own scrub python collection tour happening Sunday. And you got a sneak preview of this, Steven. What do you think? You think people are in for a treat?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I definitely pulled out all the stops, showed some awesome stuff, threw a few colubrids in there for the colubrid fans as well.
Yes.
So yeah, I really, for one, really appreciate you, doing this with me, doing the podcast, doing the vlog. And I'm really grateful to be able to show people some of these animals.
I mean, even though I don't keep scrubs as I once used to, I got to do my duty by the scrubs. I love scrub pythons. Their demeanor, their calmness. I mean, majority of the scrub pythons I had were imports, and they were all very handleable. You could take them out, and man, such an impressive species of reptiles. So, guys, do me a favor. Kush's reptiles, Kush Reptiles on MorphMarket. You'll see these animals right here on his MorphMarket. So please go inquire. And again, Steven, thanks for hanging out with us. I really appreciate it. And like he said, every Wednesday you can catch Steven Kush's his own podcast under the Trap Talk Reptile Network, Kush's Corner. But guys, do me a favor, give it up for Steven Kush. It's a wrap, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, Steven. Have a good weekend. Thank you so much.
I want to say before we go, though, for at least the next couple of days, anybody from this podcast who hits me up on any of the scrubs that I have up on MorphMarket, I will do 10% off with free MorphMarket shipping on any of them. And I don't do sales ever, really, but
I'll throw one better. I'll throw one better. Whoever gets a scrub from Steven, I will also send you a MorphMarket merch pack. All right, I'll send you sick ass hats like this.
There you go.
And maybe a polo. I don't know. We'll see what I can come up with. But
all right,
thank you so much, Steven. I appreciate it, guys. Check him out on Instagram and his YouTube channel. But have a good weekend, Steven. Thank you so much.
You too, man. Thank you for having me.
All right, take care. And guys, thank you again for hanging out. If this was your first time hanging out on the MorphMarket Show and Tell show, then hit the like button right now for all the scrub pythons out there. If you enjoy the work behind the scrubs that Steven's doing, make sure you hit that like button as well. And if you want to be reminded of all these shows, if you want to make sure you don't miss the next show and tell that happens every Friday here on the MorphMarket channel, make sure you hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell, select all. You'll be reminded every single time. Okay. So thank you for all the love and support. Shout out to all my fellow MorphMarket members out there, supporters. You guys are awesome. Drop a comment in the comment section. Let me know what favorite scrub it was that Steven showed on this show, first and foremost. Okay. And we're looking forward to bringing you more amazing MorphMarket content every Friday. And again, don't forget this Sunday, if you really want a good deep dive on the kind of scrubs Steven's working with, this is going to be a vlog tour you do not want to miss. Okay. So thank you again, Steven Kush, for participating. And yeah, guys, that's all we have this week on the MorphMarket Show and Tell show. And we'll catch you here next week. And I'm out.